Welcome, everybody. Friday, July 7th. John Aravosis here with the Aravosis Report. Welcome all. I am here in Washington, D.C. to bring you the latest news from Ukraine. As always, let's wait a minute or two, adjust my camera, for folks to join us. And in the meantime, I will get TikTok rolling here on my iPad. Come on, iPad. Open. There we go. Hang on here. And maybe take a second, introduce yourselves, where you are all hailing from, if you would. There we go. TikTok, go live. And of course, I just ate, which means now I'm going to have like allergy coughing at you. I had to eat before the show. You know me. I get in the middle of the show and I get hungry and I get hangry. Woo. Anyway, a little more light, maybe. It's sunny today. It messes up the light. Hey, Radoslav, Kapis. How we doing today, folks? Friday. Very exciting. Check my temperature in the room too while we're waiting for folks to join us on the show. All right. All right. There we go. Okay. Excellent. Oops. Hang on. Adjusting my temperature a little bit more. Thank you for the gift, Crazy American. Introduce yourselves, guys. Say where you're hailing from, if you would. I think it's kind of it's always a nice way to start the show. Happy Friday. Happy Friday. We're now at the point in Washington, D.C. where it's muggy. Thank you, Succeed. It's muggy for the rest of the summer. And it drives me insane because it basically is 90 degrees through the rest of the summer for the next 2 months. And it's just like, I mean, my garden loves it, but God, it's so freaking hot. Oh, thank you, Lee Shaw. It's just so freaking hot, you know. Anyway, thanks, Elizabeth, for the gift. So how's everybody doing? Happy Friday, all. Kind of a slow news day. Thank you, Jenna Mom. It's actually kind of a slow news day. So we'll see how this goes. We may get more questions than usual or even better, I may be able to finish on time and we'll go to Discord afterwards. Thank you, Eva. Because that's rare. So, 11 p.m. and 20 is nice. Hey, Tom, thanks for the gold mine. 20C. Yeah. I mean, overnight it gets, thanks, Big Hawk. In the corner of my eye, I saw like a red thing flying out of my head. All right, guys, I'm going to get rolling. Welcome, everybody. John Aravosis here with the Aravosis Report, coming to you live from Washington, D.C. As you guys know, this is my nightly show, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern time, U.S. That's New York City time or Washington, D.C. time. Thank you, John. I am coming to you from Washington, D.C., and we talk about the latest news from the war in Ukraine. Hey, Denise, good to see you again from Kyiv. And thank you, Mark, for the gift. The way the show works is I will spend the first half of the show or so talking to you guys about the latest news, and then second half of the show, I didn't see that, Carla. If you've got a source for that, Carla, I'd love to talk about it. Sorry, Carla's saying, thanks for who was the hat there? Thank you, LWD. Carla was saying that the Turkish president just said he was okay with Sweden joining NATO. And that certainly didn't happen up until the moment before I started the show. So thank you, B. Smith and Timothy. If that just happened and somebody wants to confirm it, that'd be great. Really? On CNN? Well, let's see. If somebody can confirm it elsewhere, I say that only because actually, this will be one of my teaching moments here. Thank you, Kimmy. One of the things I've learned with news, thank you, Katie, is people, thank you, Nate. You could have I'm not saying you got it wrong, but I found that like I can't trust people randomly giving me news because even news websites, I'm not going to name names, even news websites that go and look at news. Oh, Ukraine. Okay. Yeah, that's not going to, Ukraine's. Yeah. Oh, I see. Turkey's okay with Ukraine joining. Well, Turkey. Okay, there you go. Okay, that's different. Yeah. Well, we'll talk about it. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I thought it was Sweden. I was going to say Sweden would have been weird. Any case, guys, let me get rolling. We're going to talk about Turkey and NATO and all that in a minute. Anyway, it's one of our big topics. So thank you, Cami, for the hearts. Let me just do a quick pitch. So the way you submit questions, TikTok has made it harder. Oh, what a surprise. TikTok removed the Q&A link on my end. Thank you, Trellitic. So let me see if it's back now. So when I pull up TikTok on my app, I no longer have the Q&A link. So even if you guys have the Q&A link on TikTok, thank you, Joanne, I can't access it. So the only way you can send me questions now is on the screen right here, which is okay. It comes scrolling by, but I can't access it even if you do have it on the page because TikTok, in all of its wisdom, does funny things. Funny TikTok. For the rest of you, same thing. You can submit questions in the box at the bottom. I very much appreciate, thank you, Kanausi, the super chat and super stickers on YouTube. They help support my work. And thank you, Nate, for the gifts there. And as a thank you for the super chat questions, I will always get to the super chat questions as the next thing I talk about. So thank you for that. Thank you, Allie, for the happy Friday. And thank you for the gifts on TikTok. Same story. I do appreciate the gifts, especially Troy, especially that night thing cracks me up. Thank you, Martin, for the little, I always forget what he is, a seal. Yeah, TikTok gifts. So I do this full time. So I appreciate the gifts on TikTok as well, because the gifts help me keep doing this work, because quite literally those gifts pay my salary. That's how I support myself. So thank you, guys. All right. Let's get rolling here. So it's day 498 of Putin's 3-day special military operation in Ukraine. Thank you, Red Watts. The Zelenskyy has basically been making a tour of NATO countries. He can't hit them all because there's 31 of them, but NATO is having its big meeting next week in Vilnius, Lithuania. I believe the meeting may start on Tuesday of next week. Today's Friday. And Zelenskyy has been hitting a lot of the key allies. Thank you, Lori. Yesterday, he visited, I think, was it Bulgaria and Czech Republic. Today, he was in Slovakia and Turkey. I'm not sure which one he's in first. Thank you, Kelly. Someone was just saying on TikTok that CNN's reporting that Erdogan in Turkey said that he would support Ukraine joining NATO. Honestly, I think Ukraine's going to have the biggest problem from two things joining NATO. Well, put aside the war. There's that question, we've talked about it before, of how do you admit someone to NATO who's at war? Or if the war is resolved, but not resolved, right? If the war stops, but it isn't totally resolved, Russia still controls part of Ukraine. Thank you, Lise. What do you do? Let me step back. The thing I'm trying to explain. Oh, thank you, AJ. Sorry, AJ just gave a really cool gift. We've got whoa, very nice one there. Thank you for that. Happy Friday. What NATO worries about, among other things, with Ukraine joining or anybody joining, they don't want someone joining who's actively at war or about to get into a war, because it's not like, NATO wants to stop wars. That's the whole idea. Thank you, A63. But there's a concern, of course, of letting people in whose, whether it's their boundaries aren't settled or whatever. So clearly, Ukraine at war would be a problem, because on its face, would we go to war if Ukraine joins NATO and they're at war? Does that mean we're at war with Russia? Right? It's confusing. If Ukraine settles the war with Russia, but it's not settled, meaning if the war stops, both sides agree to stop, but it's a stalemate, right? Russia still controls, say, Crimea or some of southern Ukraine. Well, then does NATO let Ukraine in, knowing that at some point in the future, Ukraine is going to want to start a war, understandably, to take its land back? What do you do, right? In any case, that's an outstanding question. Another outstanding question for Ukraine joining NATO is going to be Hungary, because it's run by a man who kind of wishes he was a Soviet dictator, Viktor Orban. Thank you, Nicholas. And he really hates Ukraine, and he loves Putin. So Orban, there's no way in hell that Orban is ever going to approve, I think, Ukraine joining NATO, and he gets a veto over it, just like Turkey has a veto over Sweden right now. Hungary is also vetoing Sweden right now. So that concerns me too. I also, in the end, have no idea. Thank you, Thomas, for the travel postcard. I also have no idea where France and Germany will be on this. Will they be funny? Will Germany look at it and say, well, after the war, we don't really want to upset things with Russia? Germany goes back to its, I think they call it, I'll never be able to pronounce it. Is it Ostpolitik? Sort of the politic of looking to the east, kind of, it's a détente kind of politics. Basically, thank you, adventures, trying to get along with the Russians, right? France also likes getting along with the Russians for business interests, among other reasons. So how will they feel? Will they feel that we need to, hold off a little bit? Now, Radoslav is saying that in Bulgaria, there's been a big change of heart and the new government is showing support for Ukraine. Now, that's interesting, because I think, thank you, Elizabeth. Correct me if I'm wrong, Radoslav, but didn't you guys have an election recently, and actually a less friendly crowd got elected? I thought, like, somebody who was a little less friendly to Ukraine was the concern. Yeah, that's what I thought. That's really interesting. What I'm curious, I mean, not that we can get into a whole conversation here, but what caused that to change? I'm curious. Hey, thank you, Louis, for the little guy there. The president, okay, the president's the less friendly one. Okay. But in your system of government, the president isn't as important, though. Okay. I'm trying to remember, was it Bulgaria or Slovakia that Zelenskyy destroyed the president yesterday? Which one was it? Was it you guys or was it Slovakia? Yesterday, Zelenskyy it was Bulgaria. Oh, this was a great story. Yesterday, you Google it, it's somewhere out there. Zelenskyy is in Bulgaria, and the ruling party is good, like Radoslav is saying, who's in Bulgaria, but the president, and again, I think it's like president and prime minister, so the prime minister's got the power, the president, whether the president's more of a figurehead or whatever, I don't know, but Zelenskyy is sitting at I believe like a table with the Bulgarian president, who's very bad on Ukraine, and in front of the cameras just opens up on him and really opens up on him. And the president apparently got very uncomfortable because Zelenskyy was just really berating him, and finally said, well, I have an idea for a peace plan, or how we can solve this. But he made the press leave the room. But I don't want the press to hear. So basically he found a reason to get the press out because he was so embarrassed. But yeah, that was pretty feisty. But I also read that today, I believe Zelenskyy may have done a little bit of it in Slovakia too. I don't know why. Thank you, James, for that super sticker. There's something with Slovakia that somebody isn't being as helpful, or there's some pro Moscow sentiment there, at least among some people. And Zelenskyy did speak out about it today. But that's very interesting. So that was Bulgaria. Funny. Now let's talk about the cluster munitions. So big story today. The U.S. approved of cluster munitions for Ukraine. These are basically weapons that, first of all, they're weapons Russia's been using in the war for a year and a half now. Thank you, Leaf, for the gift there. So it's nothing new in that sense, right? I mean, literally, Russia's been using it. Russia, of course, by the way, thank you, David, for the gift. Russia, of course, today complained that America was giving Ukraine the very weapons that Russia's been using for almost a year and a half now. So classic Russia, right? But cluster bombs, basically, from what I know, imagine like an artillery shell, so like a bomb that is of metal that is filled with lots of little bombs. Now, it could be filled with tens of bombs. It could be filled with a couple hundred bombs, but it's a couple. So imagine like 100 bomblets inside this. This thing goes flying, overhead. It could be artillery, or it could be shot anything, I guess, missiles, and it then opens in the air at a designated point and drops 100 little bombs down. Well, you can imagine what you'd use this for. You would use this if, for example, you were trying to take out Russian trenches, right? Because the Russians are very dug in, and they're super dug in the trenches, and you want to basically, otherwise Ukraine's got to go trench by trench. Literally, I'm talking a trench in the ground, right? Dug in the ground 6 feet deep. They've got to go through each one with a gun and take these guys out. Potentially using the cluster bombs is one way to take out the Russians in a more safe way for Ukraine. Another option is Bakhmut. Remember in Bakhmut in the east, how the Russians were trying for like 11 months to take it. They finally took it about a month ago. The Wagner guys took it, and they were throwing like waves of Russian troops at the Ukrainians, but like World War I style. I mean, like crazy. Like literally just throwing these guys at them, almost faster than the Ukrainians could shoot them. Well, cluster bombs are a way of taking out a large crowd of soldiers, right, at once. The Russians, of course, use them in civilian areas. Big surprise. The Russians use them in cities and everywhere else. Now, the good argument for cluster bombs, I was reading more about this today. We have another Russian. We have a Russian pretending to be, I love this. I really do. When we get Russian trolls, I told you guys, and I always get a kick out of it because they're very bad at the Russian trolls. They troll, basically Russian trolls, meaning people who pretty much are paid to come and try to sow trouble in conversations. And we just got one on Facebook that I just blocked. And they pretend to be Americans or English. They always have Americans or English names. And then they don't speak English right. And this guy, Daryl Brandley, Thank you, Ben, for the hat. Daryl Brandley. Like, it's almost like an American with an English, to an American, that sounds like an English name. Daryl Brandley. Daryl Brandley says, in perfect, not quite English, mind your own business. You don't know what you're, of course, it's your Y-O-U-R, what you're talking about. Mind your own business. You don't know. It's one sentence. Mind your own business. You don't know what you're talking about. It is incredibly difficult not to use a Russian accent when reading that sentence. Anyway, it just cracks me up because they're really bad at this. Well, they're as good at trolling as they are at warfare of late, basically. So anyway, cluster bombs we were talking about before we got so rudely interrupted. One of the big advantages of it that Biden talked about today. Thank you, Florica. I probably missed a few of the gifts. Florica, anybody else? Just looking here. Ben sent some roses. Okay. I didn't want to miss you guys while I was sort of on a roll. But Biden talked today about one of the other advantages, basically saying, he said, Ukraine's running out of ammunition. And we had to find a way of basically filling the gap. And the way we did it is with cluster bombs. Cluster bombs can be used as artillery. When I say running out of ammunition, I mean running out of artillery, right? So they can be used as artillery or in the place of artillery. And what that means is Ukraine can basically, instead of firing, over the next, thank you, Frumpy or Frumple, in the next 3 months, say, instead of only firing artillery, thank you, Sam, I am, Ukraine could fire 50% utility, 50% cluster bombs, right? So it lets them save the artillery and stretch it out longer. So that's good. The negative, of course, there's a negative here, and it's controversial, among some circles, is cluster bombs are hard to get rid of. They supposedly, the ones the U.S. is providing, have only a 2.35% dud rate, meaning only 2.35% of the total cluster bombs dropped are supposed to not go off. They're all supposed to go off when they land, right? But typically they don't. And sometimes, like the Russian ones can have, I was reading today, rates going as high as 30% that the bombs don't go off. Well, what that means is if one artillery shell drops 100 little bombs, 30, in Russia's case, 30 of those bombs don't go off. So you've now got 30 bombs spread all over the place, and they may not go off for months or years. Little kids can find them, animals, people, etc. Your own troops coming through the area can trip them almost like mines. Thank you, Ellen, for the heart. So the international community, a lot of countries have, yesterday we were saying 100. Today I read as many as 120 countries have signed a ban on using cluster bombs. The human rights groups are all very upset, but they're kind of getting destroyed today because the problem is, if you're Ukraine, thank you, Kazakh, for the heart. If you're Ukraine and someone tells you, you can't use this bomb, I know you need the bomb, right? Thank you, Brock. And you really need the bomb because you're running low on artillery. And if you run out of ammunition, you're literally dead. The Russians are going to overrun you. They're going to take over your country. They're going to make you part of Russia. And they're going to steal all your children in addition to murdering all of you and literally wiping your country off the map. And mind you, let me remind you, stealing your children. But, if you win the war and you use cluster bombs, it's going to be a real problem because you're going to have a lot of these little bombs all over and kids can get hurt and they can be problems for years. And I think somebody maybe said the former Yugoslavia, a lot of those follow-on states have had problems. Well, if you're Ukrainian, you're kind of, it's a bit like dying of cancer or something. And the doctor says, this cure may work, but you've got to know the cure, you may have after effects that could be bad. Well, okay, but if I don't get them, I'm dying, right? So you kind of, thank you, Nico, for the hearts. You kind of have to decide, right? I think comparing it to cancer is almost too much because I could see somebody with cancer or a terminal illness or the illness that would be terminal saying the cure is worse than the illness, right? I would end up, stuck in a wheelchair. I wouldn't be able to speak because the drugs would, whatever, right? Brain surgery, right? The brain surgery, you'd no longer be able to speak and you could have mental problems, all this kind of stuff, right? Sure. That's not what's happening here. Thank you, Nico and Tom. They're not saying Ukraine will be a nuclear wasteland if you win the war. They're saying you could win the war and get rid of the Russians and not lose your country and not lose your children, but you will have parts of the country that could be dangerous and you could have these munitions and they're going to be very hard to get rid of and innocent people could die. Yes. but we also could have entire Ukraine being a bucha. And better for Ukraine to survive to fight another day and then deal with cluster bombs than for Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International, among others, to sit there and tut. It's just not appropriate. I mean, actually somebody, I know was it Ilya Ponomarenko? I'm forgetting his name. Ukrainian, the journal. I keep mixing the journalist up with the other guy. I think he's a Ukrainian journalist. And he wrote a really interesting, nice long tweet last night. Thank you, Brock. And I should have, hold on. I'm going to see if I can find it. It was such a good sort of answer to the cluster bomb question. And again, I don't want to knock this because I understand the argument, and it's a good argument, meaning we should be worried about cluster bombs. They don't go away, and children can get harmed, and that's a big deal. UNICEF will tell you, other groups will tell you. But when Ukraine is talking about its utter existence, it rings a little hollow. Let me find this because I retweeted him last night, and it was such a, it wasn't even last night. Hang on. I think I've got it right here even. Oops, hang on here. Beep, 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 beep. Hang on. All right. Here we go. I'm going to read you this. It's a little long, but it's worth reading. It's from, Ilya Ponomarenko, who's a defense reporter with the Kyiv Independent. Okay. Speaking of all the drama over cluster munitions for Ukraine, meaning I want to speak about all the drama. Let's resume. He's Ukrainian. Let's resume this conversation when all those critics sitting in their comfortable air-conditioned offices somewhere in the West find themselves in the following situation. When their nations have to fight an existential war against an adversary enjoying overwhelming supremacy in artillery and air power, with a far larger economy and population, with a totalitarian political regime that knows no bounds and is ready to spend any amount of cannon fodder, including suicidal convicts and mercenaries. When they see their own hometowns wiped off the earth along with their population and proudly proclaimed as liberated, when their nation has to mobilize way over 1 million men and women to their military and try and keep their shattered economy at least somewhat afloat while trying to stay as free and democratic as possible, when they have to wake up in the dead of night due to missile and drone attacks and hope it's not about their neighborhood and their house right here and now, when they realize the ongoing war has inflicted major damage to their country's critical infrastructure that will last for decades, when they're when their military and political leadership has to spend endless months begging for weapons and assistance for their war effort. Hold on a second here. I'm skipping a little bit of it. Now, then I'd be very interested if they think their militaries need cluster munitions to go on fighting. Let me see. Yeah, it just says, dear ladies and gentlemen, I'm very curious about why certain organizations, meaning Human Rights Watch and Amnesty, overtly accuse Ukraine of putting civilians in war zones in jeopardy with cluster munitions before Ukraine even gets these munitions. His point is just that, thank you, Inverted. Better to live than to die. If Ukraine loses the war, it's not like these aren't nuclear weapons. It's not like we're saying, well, the only way for for Ukraine to win is to nuke Russia and start a nuclear war, and they'd win, but all the planet would be vaporized. Okay, yeah, sure. A nuclear war is not the way to win this, right? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a weapon that sucks, but is necessary, and it could be really helpful in the current situation. And there is concern about, again, Biden, I don't think should have said it. Biden, of course, was being Biden again today. He literally said, in his explanation for why the U.S. needed to approve this, he said the Ukrainians are running out of ammunition. Now, I'm not convinced Biden should have said that, but nonetheless, what do you do? In any case, all right, let me move on. Ukrainians are making a little bit of counteroffensive news today. Ukrainian forces are making further gains south of Bakhmut. Bakhmut, you will recall, is the Ukrainian town here in the east. Russians were fighting for like 11 months to take the town. They took it about a month ago. The Ukrainians are trying to take it back now. And the Ukrainians had more successes south of the city. They moved a kilometer in the last day or so. That's about 0.6 of a mile. But moving that much in a day is actually pretty good. You've got to consider the Russians were moving that much in a month. Over the last year, like horrifically, right? So it's slow, but it's good. There was an interesting discussion today online. I don't remember now. I don't remember what news source I saw this in, but they were talking about why is it that the Ukrainians are trying to get um, Bakhmut back from the Russians, and they gave a number of interesting analyses. First of all, um, it makes sense. One argument is to embarrass Russia overall. Bakhmut was the only victory the Russians had, in the last, like, since last September, maybe, was the only victory, and it was a small victory. The Russians won a town of 60,000 people, that just doesn't really matter. I mean, it matters. I get it, Ukrainians, but you know what I mean. It's not a hugely important strategic city. Okay. Um, so the question becomes then why do the Ukrainians want it back? Well, it was the Russians bragged a lot about it when they got it back. So Ukraine getting it back again is just embarrassing for Putin and the regime, and it makes Putin a little bit weaker, and it makes Russian morale be a little bit worse. Fair enough. The second reason I thought was really interesting was Prigozhin. And the idea was that Prigozhin, who's the leader of the coup, leader of the Wagner group, which is the mercenary group, the soldiers for hire that were fighting in Ukraine, that were mostly fighting in Bakhmut, by the way, and that tried to overthrow the government, that tried to overthrow Putin 2 weeks ago. Well, Prigozhin's troops pretty much won Bakhmut. They were the ones doing most of the fighting. If Ukraine is able to win back, mind you, it took Prigozhin, pretty much 11 months. Thank you, Andy, for the hat. Pretty much 11 months to win Bakhmut. If the Ukrainians are able to get Bakhmut in a couple months back, then it shows that now that Wagner is no longer there, right? Because the Wagner guys look like, we don't quite know what's happening. We'll talk about that in a second. But the Wagner guys don't seem to be fighting, at least in Bakhmut, anymore. We know that. They left. Thank you, Inverted. If the Russians lose Bakhmut, then it shows that Prigozhin was right and that his troops are better than the regular Russian military troops, right? So it makes Prigozhin look good and it makes Putin look bad. Okay, that's a good thing. It also reignites the war. I'm sorry, and that's a good thing because right now Putin is trying to make Prigozhin look bad. Putin basically, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. There was a really interesting article in the Wall Street Journal. Oh, tell me I did that. Yes, there was a really interesting article in the Wall Street Journal talking about Prigozhin and kind of what's going on with his power relative to Putin's power. And I'm going to talk about that at the very end. But Putin doesn't think he can take out Prigozhin right now. Otherwise, Putin would kill him. So Putin thinks he needs him. So he's trying to discredit Prigozhin by showing he was wealthy. Remember, and he had multiple passports and all this kind of stuff. And maybe he misspent the money we gave him and this kind of stuff, right? To make him look bad in the public's eye. This makes him look good in the public eye. So it makes that feud more difficult between Putin and Prigozhin. Thank you, Mando. It also makes the feud more difficult between Prigozhin and the Russian Ministry of Defense because they've also been fighting because Prigozhin naturally keeps saying, my men are better. My private army is better than the Russian Ministry of Defense. That's why you should hire me, right? Well, and the Russian ministry can't stand him for this reason because he keeps criticizing them. Thank you, Achilles and Poppy. So by taking back Bakhmut and proving that, in fact, Prigozhin's troops were the good troops, and now that the regular Russian troops are there, they suck, you're also helping fuel, again, that feud between Prigozhin and the Russian Ministry of Defense. So knowing the Ukrainians, I would say, I am sure they're taking this into account. The Ukrainians seem very good at that kind of Machiavellian politics, very by Machiavellian, but I mean very deep strategies and riddles within, things like just layers within layers of their strategy, right? So the idea of doing this to just make life harder for Putin and make life harder for the Ministry of Defense and just cause more fracture in Russian society. So it was very interesting. I thought it was an interesting argument. Let me do a quick pitch for my membership services, and then we'll come back and we will talk about the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. So just real quick, guys, one of the ways you can help me, I do appreciate the gifts, by the way, so thank you, the super chats and the TikTok gifts, but another way you can help is by becoming a monthly subscriber. Now, monthly subscriber on YouTube, is very easy. You simply click the little $ at the bottom of the screen and you sign up. And it goes monthly. You'll get a little color by your name, like at least on my end, Greg Monroe's name is green, which show Greg as a monthly subscriber. Thank you there, Greg. I'm looking. I don't see anybody else. Yesterday we had a lot of folks. Not seeing anybody else right now. But it's a way of supporting my work monthly. You do get a little, notoriety, so to speak, because your name will be a different color. You get access to some emojis and things that other people don't get. But bottom line is, you help support my work, which is nice, and it helps me out. On TikTok, it's Twitter, excuse me, English. On YouTube, it's very easy. Just click the little $ at the bottom of the comment section. It'll open up, and you pick the membership thing. Twitch, you can do the same. And with Twitch, remember on Twitch, by the way, Twitch, you can use your Amazon subscriptions to give me a Twitch subscription for free. In other words, you don't even have to pay the $5 a month. But so consider that on Twitch. For you guys on TikTok, among others, you can use Ko-fi. Now, Ko-fi is a great way. I mean, TikTok, you can do TikTok subscriptions as well. But thank you, Ryan. Ko-fi works where basically it's the same thing like Patreon in essence. It's a monthly subscription service. We don't really like Patreon lately because they've gotten really negative on. They've just not negative. They've been anti-Ukraine creators. They don't want to. They've basically been coming after a lot of us that are helping Ukraine. Ko-fi does not. Ko-fi's great. You can find the link in my profile on TikTok. You guys can find the link at the bottom of the screen. It's ko-fi.com/Aravosis. And you can give a one-time donation or a monthly donation. It's very easy. Check it out. TikTok, you can also just go to my profile and TikTok, click the Linktree link, and that link will take you. The first thing that comes up is Ko-fi. If you do it monthly, you will be a VIP member of our Discord, which gives you access to our VIP auctions, which we have a lot of cool stuff from Ukraine. And as Callum just asked, we also have a Saturday morning coffee talk that we will be doing. Thank you, Kelly. Most Saturday mornings, I don't promise all, because if I'm flying and stuff, I don't, but most Saturday mornings, we get together at 11 a.m. Eastern time US. That's 11 a.m. New York City time, if you're trying to compare where you are. And my friend Vlad in Ukraine usually joins us, and we just talk about the latest stuff. It's very casual, coffee. Usually we talk about Ukraine because Vlad's joining us, but it doesn't have to be, but it usually is. But Vlad's there, so basically you're able to also firsthand hear from somebody in Ukraine and kind of get a sense of what's going on. Anyway, it's if you can, I'd appreciate it. Again, it's a nice way of helping me out, and it gives you a VIP access, which is nice too. So if you can, I would appreciate it. All right, let me get rolling with the rest of this. Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. So, there's been concern for the last while now. Yeah, I got the troll. I got the troll myself while we were talking. So that was my angel got its wings. The Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. There has been concerns for a while that the Russians were going to blow up the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. Yesterday, there was it's the nuclear plant in southern Ukraine. Sorry, I'll show you really quick while we're talking about this. Nuclear plant, southern Ukraine, right at the tip here. Remember, all of this occupied by Russia. So the southern tip right here. And yesterday, there were satellite photos that looked like, well, they didn't look like. There were what appeared to be white objects on the top of one of the reactors. Now, it just so happens to be one of the reactors that Ukraine was worried, reactor 4, that the Russians were going to blow up. Clearly, the Ukrainians had intelligence, they had information saying the Russians were going to try to blow it up. Russia denied it, of course. Well, yesterday's satellite photos show what appear to be some kind of, thank you, Maria, some kind of white objects on the rooftops, right? The International Atomic Energy Agency, which is a United Nations organization that deals with nuclear reactors and things, they have been on site for months now. The Russians will not let them access the roof. As of today, the Russians will let them access the reactor and stuff. They won't let them go on the roof. The roof is where the Ukrainians said the bombs are. And then the roof is where, after the Ukrainians said that the Russians were going to bomb it, the satellite showed strange objects on the roof that were not there before. Okay. Well, as of today, the Russians will not let the UN on the roof. Again, suspicious as hell. I talked to one defense expert today who is free to out themselves if they want, but who told me that the white objects look like sandbags. From a military perspective, they look like sandbags, and they're the kind of thing that basically, and I was thinking, well, sandbags, does that mean they're there for defense? Like if one of the concerns was that Russians were on the roof with, machine guns and everything else, right? Okay, sorry, mods, just so you know. Yeah, I was just going to say, somebody like that gets banned immediately on YouTube. Thank you. You can smell that person is not a, sorry. It's very trolly today. Russia must be getting worried. Isn't it fun to ban them though, Michaela? Banning the bad people. I mean, not the good people, the bad people. But I was saying, if there's sandbags on the roof of the nuclear plant, couldn't it just be that we don't want the Russians on the plant with machine guns, but we read the Russians have like anti-aircraft weapons, machine guns, whatever. Thank you, Randy. On the rooftop, couldn't they just be sandbags to protect the weapons, so they can sit behind when they're shooting? Again, they shouldn't be there anyway, but right. And I was told not the way these sandbags were laid out. A, they look like sandbags, and B, the way they were laid out looks like the way, basically not the way you lay them out for protection, for defense. What they could be is preparation for bombs. That basically, if you want the bomb on the roof to do as much damage to the roof right and down, you would put the bomb and you'd cover it with sandbags, right? And actually, you do even more than that. Thank you. Who's that? Rob? Was that Rob? Oh, no, I'm saying Rob for Robe. Thank you, Storm, for the gift. You would do even more than that. I'm not even going to go through all the details here, but bottom line is you would put a bomb, you would put the sandbags on top, and it would help force the blast through the roof and cause more damage on the nuclear plant. And that's exactly what those looked like. Are they sandbags? We don't know, because the Russians will not let the United Nations on there. Thank you, Red, for the cap there. So very weird, very weird. Yeah, WC, I realized at some point, I didn't want to go through all the explanation of the best way to fire off explosives. So I appreciate your feedback, but I wasn't going to go there. I'm only going to tell people so much of ways you can blow things up. That's not my job here, and not what I want to be doing. I don't know. Good question on why you wouldn't blow it up from the outside, from the inside. I don't know. I know with the dam, with the hydroelectric dam, or with the dam, the thinking is that the Russians did do it from the inside, because the dam is so well constructed that you can't do it from the outside. You would have to find a room on the inside that the explosion would be so compact because of the room that it would blow up the dam. And they believe that's what the Russians did. But that's a good question. With the nuclear plant, why wouldn't you just blow it up from inside? Why would you do it from the outside? I mean, they're separate from the UN, but they're a UN agency, are they not? I believe they're a UN agency, but they are separate from the UN. Yeah, that's why I said a UN agency, not a UN, not a UN, UNDP, et cetera. Anyway, just kind of curious. Well, okay. That's a really funny point. Okay. Andy just gave a very obvious answer that I didn't think of. Thank you, Andy. Andy said, if they did it from the inside, it's hard to blame Ukraine for it. And actually, Zenzalez said the same thing. Harder to blame someone else if it explodes from the inside. That's true. What the theory was from the Ukrainians, that the Russians were going to try to claim that it was, Ukrainian artillery fire, or somehow the Ukrainians missed and they blew up the plant, right? So they would want an explosion on the outside. That was it. I was trying to remember what the reason was, but that was why. Yep. Whereas the dam, there's just no way to blow it up from the outside. So you'd have to go inside and set the charges. Of course, not like Russia's being held accountable for the dam anyway, right? Which Ukrainians are pointing out, and they're not wrong. NATO. So a little bit of water, and let's talk about NATO. It's funny. I had very few topics on my list. I only had 2 pages of paper. Normally I have 4 to 6, but we're going long tonight. Sorry. NATO. So the big NATO meeting is happening next week, starting on Tuesday. There were 2 things hoped for. One was that there would be a breakthrough with Turkey, and Turkey would agree to let Sweden join NATO. That has not happened. Erdogan, the kind of wannabe dictator of Turkey, came out today and once again said he's opposed to letting Sweden join. I think at some point the Biden administration needs to come down hard on Turkey, and he hasn't done it yet. The Congress is starting to do it, but they're starting to talk about it. The only thing Erdogan is going to understand is Congress coming down on him. And again, they're afraid of it because they're afraid of pushing Putin, or pushing Erdogan, the Turkish leader, into Putin's arms. I got news for you. Yeah, we need Turkey because they're right there at the Middle East. But guess what? Turkey needs us too. The last thing Turkey needs is Russia. Russia is not an ally. They can trust us a hell of a lot more than they can trust Russia. Also, lately, from what I've seen, Russia, not so good at being a military ally, right? In any case, but I think we need to get a little tougher with Turkey on this stuff. They did stop the sale of the F-16s, but I think it's going to have to start. They're going to have to start upping the ante here, because the other problem here too is you're starting to set a precedent for other members. What's happening right here? Thank you, Kanausi. What's happening with Turkey and NATO and Sweden is you're setting a precedent for Ukraine joining NATO, because guess what's going to happen next? The Hungarians are going to do the exact same thing. And the Hungarians are going to sit there and drag it out and say, well, you let Turkey drag it out for a year and a half, 2 years. And then you gave them stuff, because I'm sure we're going to bribe Turkey in the end. But the Hungarians are going to need the same kind of browbeating. In any case, just keep it in mind. The other issue is that Ukraine was hoping there would be some kind of an announcement that would make clear of a path forward for Ukraine to join NATO or something. Jens Stoltenberg, who's the Secretary General of NATO, said today that the Vilnius summit, the meeting next week of NATO members, will agree on a 3-part package to bring Ukraine closer to NATO. That is, right? Bring Ukraine closer to NATO. He didn't say a 3-part package to, bring Ukraine into NATO, or right, to help Ukraine join, or a 3-part package for Ukraine to join. Right? He didn't to bring. So the goal of at the end of the 3-part package, after it all is instituted, Ukraine will be closer to NATO. Ooh, how exciting, right? It's like you ask somebody to marry you and they say, no, but I've got some ideas on how we can be closer. Is that okay? Right? I mean, that's what they're saying. And by the way, it's all because of Turkey. It's not all because of Turkey, actually. I still think some of the other NATO members, we know, not Turkey, excuse me. We know Hungary is the big problem. Thank you, Chazak. We know Hungary is the big problem, but we also know that it's not no. I worry whether France and Germany are really on board for Ukraine joining NATO. I don't know. What else? Belarus. CNN reported today that Western officials are not seeing signs of nuclear weapons or the Wagner Group in Belarus. Remember, for a while now, the Russians keep claiming they were moving nuclear weapons into Belarus, another country run by a dictator, that's right next to Ukraine, but also next to a number of NATO countries, Poland, Latvia, Lithuania. They're just not seeing the nukes. So it's still not clear the Russians really moved them in. They lied. Big surprise. And we're not seeing the Wagner Group either. Prigozhin, it seems Prigozhin is still in St. Petersburg, Russia. Remember, he was sent in exile to Belarus. He ain't there from what we're seeing. He's having fun, right? He's having fun. So very interesting as to what's going on there. Hang on a second. Oh, Angel's going to get its wings. Woo! Angel get its wings. Sorry, I had to get rid of a troll myself there. The question becomes, okay, what is Putin doing? Putin said, you've got to go there and your men have to go there, right? That's not what happened. Right? Prigozhin seems to be having fun in Russia on his own, happy. His men don't seem to be going to Belarus. It makes Putin look like he's not as strong. The Wall Street Journal had a really interesting article on, I'll just read this to you. I think I took 2 paragraphs out or something. The analysts, actually, these were my notes, but the analysts are saying, defense analysts are saying that the Kremlin is trying to diminish the mercenary boss's influence, this was from the Journal, without losing access to his chief asset, Wagner's 25,000 troops. So in other words, Putin realizes Prigozhin's a problem because he tried to overthrow him in a coup, but he needs the 25,000 Wagner troops, who are the best Russian troops they've got, right? And he can't risk losing those troops. Now, part of the reason he can't lose them, good sentence from the Journal, Prigozhin is part of Moscow's broader project to assert greater geopolitical influence across the Middle East and Africa, where Wagner is an important lever for the Kremlin in supporting authoritarian leaders and extracting gold and other precious resources. The Wagner Group is working for dictators in Syria, working for really bad governments like the government in Mali, and they are in return getting from some of these governments deals on gold and minerals, like either rights in the mines or at least money coming out of these mineral mines. And that's been a big deal for Russia because this is money coming back to Russia. Putin doesn't, and it's also influence. Putin doesn't want to lose that. So, but it looks like as a result of that, that Prigozhin's kind of running circles around Putin, which is kind of interesting, because at the very least, the guy's supposed to be in Belarus and he's not. Finally, Czech Republic Czech Republic today announced it was sending Ukraine more attack helicopters and more ammunition. So that's a good thing. I will show you two little auction items briefly, and then let's go to do our questions. You are just, I'm not just lying. I'm also looking fabulous. Sorry, that was a troll. See, this is what's hard. It's hard on TikTok and YouTube because you get hecklers. But the problem is the hecklers are literally a comment somebody wrote that scroll up. And if you don't see the comment, you don't get my joke. And it's hard because like in politics, you're taught to like come up with jokes that are like comebacks. We're very good in politics, at least in American politics, at like boom, 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 coming back with a joke. But then I make a joke like that. If you didn't see the comment, it's not funny. So what do you do? So real quick, I'll show you two quick things. One of the cool things we've got is we hold auctions on our Discord community. The Discord community is free. You go check it out, discord.aravosis.com. Oh, we have another Russian. Oh, how cute. Another Russian who doesn't speak English very well, but that's okay. That's okay. I don't mind people who don't speak English well, but if you're going to come here and try to be a troll, then I insist you speak English well. Because you're not sending us, Russia, if you're listening, you're not sending us your best and brightest. So discord.aravosis.com. We've got a Discord community. It's really vibrant. We will go there after the show tonight and hang out for a while. But one of the things that's cool that we do there is we hold auctions of cool stuff that I get from Ukraine. Some of it I buy, other people give to me. We've got two different women who have been making jewelry for us. Ukrainian, well, one's Ukrainian American, one is just Ukrainian, very nice American who wants to help. And both are making sort of Ukrainian jewelry, Ukrainian themed jewelry that's been really popular. And we auction it off, and 50% of the money I'm sending back to Ukraine, humanitarian aid, but also we've been helping the military out with camouflage and things like that. And the other 50% goes to support my work because I'm doing this full time. And I need to pay the bills. And this basically provides a salary for me to do the show full time. Well, I just wanted to show you, we've got like 10 auction items up, 9 or 10 auctions items this week. Go and check them out. They're at discord.aravosis.com. The only thing to keep in mind is the VIP auctions are only for the paid subscribers. That's the YouTube paid subscribers, the Ko-fi paid subscribers, Twitch, right? So check those out, but the public auctions for everybody, but they're cute. This is a really cute little Christmas ornament made by the Ukrainian government. There must be, thank you, Soren, for the gift there. There must be some Ukrainian, I asked Vlad and he didn't know that's actually the ornaments, the thing to hold the string for the ornament that's hanging down, but it's a cat. It's a cat sitting in the snow holding a sausage, and on the bottom it says Happy Holidays in Ukrainian. But I asked Vlad in Ukraine, what's the deal with a cat sitting with a sausage in the snow? Is that like a Christmas thing for Ukrainians? And Vlad goes, I don't know anything about cats and sausage. So I was like, okay, maybe not. But what I like about this, thank you, Christine. What I like is it's a cute ornament Christmas time, but then there's a magnet on the back. It's a fridge magnet. It's a refrigerator magnet the rest of the year. That's a Ukrainian ingenuity. That's a neat idea. The other thing I'll show you, and then we'll go to the questions. Buttons. It's a really nice button, though. It's this. Look, check out the plastic. Thank you, Oliver. It's a neat plastic button. When I was growing up, buttons were metal, and they kind of fell apart and got bad after a while. It's fully plastic, and it is a button of Patron the dog. Now, Patron is a mine-sniffing dog that the Ukrainians have been using for a year now. Very famous, goes and smells mines. And here you see him fishing for mines in the water. Thank you, Martin, for that. And they did he's a Jack Russell Terrier, and they did a whole series of postal stamps honoring Patron. And they're really cute. And I've got the postage stamps too that we auction off maybe in the next week or two. Thank you, Carol. And we've got sweatshirts of Patron anyway. But it's really cute. The postage stamps are really adorable, and the button is honoring Patron, which is nice. So that's we've got some, what I try to do is, thank you, Cheryl. I try to get sort of bigger auction items. We've got like a really cool cookbook. Actually, okay, what the hell? Since we're talking about this, I'll show you again. The cookbook. I love this cookbook. It's a Ukrainian cookbook in Ukrainian, but Google Maps works. But all the recipes have beautiful photos, which I love. And then the recipes, I like to cook. The recipes are very short. I mean, this is it. It's 3 paragraphs. Google Translate on your phone, the app translates it perfectly, or on the computer. Every recipe has got a page and a photo, which I love. It's just like, vareniki. Oh, these are, I guess you'd call them dumplings, Ukrainian dumplings. I had these at a Ukrainian like society thing, historical society or something here in DC last fall. Oh my God, so good. But it's great. There's over 100 recipes. We're auctioning this off as well. It does have bread. It does have bread, so it may have the pascha. Yeah, it may. Anyway, lots of other really cool stuff too. Oh, they've got like a goulash. Yes, they've got the Ukrainian version of goulash, because I remember we were looking at that, and the Czech, some of the different people were saying they've got their own versions and everything else. Yeah. Anyway, check it out. It's you'll see that being auctioned among everything else over. Well, see, I knew the Ukrainians were going to get upset if I called it a dumpling. Tulekivi is going, it's blasphemy to call it a dumpling. But for an American audience, we'd call it a dumpling or a pot sticker, or what's the, yeah, well, yeah, like, see, we call them dumplings though. Even though Americans, we don't eat them in soup, really. We would eat them like Japanese dumplings, Chinese, excuse me, like a steamed dumpling in China, where you know, copies is saying vareniki are like filled dumplings. See, the Czech guy is saying dumplings too, just so you know. Mostly meat, I guess, different taste. Oh, Cheryl, thank you for the monkey. Very cool. Mocha the monkey. I didn't know he had a name. Mostly meat, I guess, different taste than Czech dumplings. They're very good. The ones I had were served with, like sour cream and caramelized onions. It was like basically caramelized onions, sour cream, and these dumplings. Oh my God. Oh, they were so good. They were so good. Sounds like how joking. Yes. 1, 2, 3 vareniki. Oh my God, pierogies, exactly. All right, let's do Q&A, guys. As we said on TikTok, the Q&A function doesn't work, so throw your questions at the screen. The rest of you, obviously, super chat, super stickers, whatever you like, or just questions in general, all welcome. Oops, sorry, Soren, I'll throw you up there just to acknowledge you. Thank you. I know. See, now we all want to talk food. I know that got me. Thank you, Red, for the gift on TikTok. You got me talking food. I love talking food. Your wife makes pierogies. I've never made anything like that. I'm assuming they're not fun to make. I did see a Ukrainian guy on Twitter today who's making them, and he said, "Oh my God, it was." He was like, "This is really hard." Greeks make something, but it's different. I mean, we make, tiropita, which are like the triangles out of phyllo dough. So hard. I made them once for a dinner party, never making them again. But thank you, Red Watts, because it's just like doing each, they're like little footballs, doing each, the triangular footballs, doing each one by hand, horrible. But doing dumplings too, no, they're very good. But yeah, they actually, and the guy who made them was the guy who used to work at Vasilka in New York and now just opened up his restaurant in DC. And he was the chef for the event at the Ukrainian cultural center here in DC, and pretty much close to where I live. And I still do make bread. Yeah, I still make bread. But he had made the vareniki and served them with like a sour cream, like I said, and cooked onions. Oh my God, like grilled onions. Oh, amazing. All right, questions. We're still doing food here. Oof. What about the U.S. sending cluster munitions to Ukraine? We talked about it at the beginning of the show. Basically, I mean, I think it's a good idea because in the end, Ukraine is fighting a war for its existence, right? They're not fighting a war over, territory that they disagree about, right? I mean, it's not like, well, there's a border area that both countries claim. That's not what it is. This is literally Russia wants to wipe out the Ukrainians. They don't think Ukraine exists. They don't think Ukrainians exist. They want to kill all the senior people in the country. They had kill lists from the beginning. They want to kill the poets. They want to kill the artists. They want to kill the athletes. They want to kill the government officials. They want to kill all the activists who were involved in the revolution back in 2014. They want to kill everybody. They want to take the children, move all the children to Russia and turn them into Russians so that they're too young to realize and make them Russian. I mean, literally, they want to wipe out Ukrainian society. It is a genocide. And they literally would wipe out the country. They would just say, like they're already doing in southern Ukraine, they've already said southern Ukraine's now Russia. They're going to do the same thing with the whole country. It's Russia. It doesn't exist anymore. Well, if that's what's happening, yeah, cluster munitions suck, right? Munitions, you run the danger of children finding them and getting hurt, etc. Yes, but these children are going to have a pretty bad life if Russia ends up taking over the country and wipes them out and kills all their parents and kidnaps them and sends them 10,000 miles away and tries to turn them into Russians, which is what the Russians are doing. So, yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, I'm not trying to belittle what people's concerns, but I think literally we're talking, yeah, it's a weapon that does some, that has bad after effects versus they're trying to kill me. If you're trying to kill me, I will use a weapon that has bad after effects. Yes, it's better than dying. So, yep. Yep, I did see that syndicate. Yeah, I didn't report on it because some of that stuff is like blah blah, you know. And they are but further historical legacy to prove what Ukraine really is. Not sure what you mean, Little Wolf. I kind of know what you mean, Little Wolf, but I'm not totally sure what you mean by that. What else we got? Oh, we always have trolls. Just remember, Angel gets its wings every time a Russian troll gets blocked. What else we got, guys? But yeah, we talked about the nuclear plant. No news on that other than the Russians are not letting the international nuclear inspectors come and check out the roof. They're refusing so far. And the roof is exactly where the Ukrainians said that they were putting bombs and where the satellites are showing something. Any idea how the allies are responding? Wilson, good question, and thank you for that. The allies are being very good about it. Biden said today that he did talk to the allies before he went and approved the cluster munitions for Ukraine. Hang on a second, it's looking here. He went and talked to the allies. Germany's chancellor? No, it was I don't know who it was today, whether it was the chancellor or no, it was the defense minister. It was the defense minister because I saw the picture. Germany's defense minister was asked about it today because Germany signed the international convention agreeing to ban cluster munitions. He was asked and he said, we're a signatory to the ban. America isn't. You'll have to ask them on their decision. We're not going to comment, which I think was the perfect answer because it puts the allies in a position where if they have signed the treaty, they can't say cluster munitions are okay to use because they signed a treaty saying nobody can use them under any circumstances. But at the same time, they don't want to criticize the U.S. And my suspicion is too that, like, I wrote on Twitter, but I think others did too. If Russia were doing to my country what they're doing to Ukraine, there are very few weapons and techniques I would not use to stop them. It would be very difficult to find anything that I thought was too immoral, too unethical, or having too bad of an after effect, other than nuclear weapons, because, right, you use nuclear weapons, they're going to use nuclear weapons. So it doesn't even make sense to use nuclear weapons because they would use them too. But weapons that I think would have an effect or strategies, I'm trying to avoid keywords here, but I would absolutely join a bunch of other people and do lots of things to the Russians that are probably not considered very nice if the Russians were doing this to my country. So I'm not very sympathetic on the cluster bomb argument because, yeah, they suck. They suck. But Ukraine's getting wiped, or you're in danger of getting wiped out. So, it's, what do you do? Copy says, I don't really see any problem with cluster bombs. Russians are using these and mines a lot. Yeah, landmines as well are a problem that Ukraine will need to sweep all the territory. One thing I was wondering though, do cluster bombs help at all for blowing up landmines? I would think, or is it not efficient? Is it not efficient for it, or are they used for it? Any of you who are, I don't know if Callum's still here, any of the other military folks, just curious. I'm going to read more questions while I'm seeing if you guys have an answer on that. Cluster bombs being used to clear mines. Not efficient? Okay, that's what I was wondering. Okay. All right. Malaiathos is still talking about food. Someone pointed out that Kelly says somebody pointed out that the treaty didn't take into account that someone would need them for defense instead of attack. Well, that's very interesting. I think it was Human Rights Watch had an article on their website about cluster bombs, and it's interesting. Sorry, I'm not even reading the rest of your comment, Tom. I read one sentence, and that's all I'm reading. Bye. No, somebody's being a jerk, and if you're going to be rude, he wrote this much. I read the first 2 lines, and it was just rude. Don't spend your time writing this much if you're going to be rude. I always say online. Online, you get one chance to make a first impression, and that's it. And if you're rude, people are going to ban you. They're going to mute you. Like whatever social media platform you're on, they're just going to mute you, and you'll be gone. You only get one chance. Only one chance, kiddo. So yeah, that's how the Allies are responding. Forget the steamed dumplings. If you're going to be rude, be quick and witty. Exactly. Thank you, Wilson. That's why I'm a big believer in that too. If you're going to be rude, be quick and be witty. Be witty, rude at least. Oh, Paul, I did not see that, Paul. Thank you for the super sticker. Sorry, I was in the middle of, I think, talking to TikTok when you brought that up. Thank you. Anthony has a super chat question as well. I would normally be against using cluster bombs, but Russia breaks every rule in the book. So in this instance, I would be okay with cluster bombs. I mean, that's the thing. Now, I will say this. I was doing a, I've told you guys before that I was doing a exam at Georgetown. I did the Graduate School of Foreign Service at Georgetown. I did my master's there and my law degree. And they have the exams, and the exams include an oral component, and you have to write an essay and then defend it in front of 3 experts. I was sitting on a panel of, I was on the Ukraine panel. So I was one of the 3 Ukraine experts, a lot of fun. And we had to ask very specific, they gave us like some questions we had to ask, or we had to pick among them, and other questions we could make up ourselves. And one of the questions I asked, and I didn't ask everybody, and I should have, because I asked some of the people. Doesn't matter. You can ask different stuff. But I asked, in the context of Ukraine, is terrorism ever justified as a military strategy? And it was really interesting. It was just very, I mean, I don't want to tell you sort of what the guy said, because obviously it was a private exam, but it was just a very interesting discussion. And I have always thought about those discussions in the abstract. I mean, you think about them specifically as well, of course, but you know, it's one of those issues where we like to say terrorism is never okay. You know what I mean? Except if you know, if you're being wiped out, right? I mean, I always use the example. I'm going to put my AC a little colder. I always use the example of if Russia had invaded the Soviet Union, had invaded and taken over America, you know, Man in the High Castle or whatever, wonderful TV series. Man in the High Castle, I'd be on the front lines of doing all that to the Russians, and in that case the Japanese. You know, not the Russians. In that case, it was the Germans and the Japanese, right? But I'd be the first person on the front line doing that. But it's a really interesting question. Thank you, pediatric nurse. It does. But again, if the Soviets occupy your country, if the Soviet Union occupied America, thank you, Shell, for the gift there. Right? I mean, would you blow up their grocery stores? You know, for example, what the Soviets had back in the Soviet Union, they had special stores for the rich people and stuff, like for the party officials. You wouldn't blow up a store for the party officials? No, I'm quite seriously. I mean, I think it's a very interesting question, because we like to think that no, you wouldn't use terrorism, and biological weapons and even nuclear weapons are bad. Well, again, if you could get away with it, and if it worked, because that's why I say nuclear weapons don't really work, because you use a nuke and then the other guy uses nukes, and like that doesn't get you, and you nuke your own. Like if the Russians invaded and captured Washington, D.C., blowing off a nuke in Washington, D.C. doesn't really help, because then we destroyed our own town, right? So it would have to be something that works, but it's a very interesting question. And this is what the Ukrainians were getting at with regards to the cluster munitions. They're not terrorism, but it gets you into that same category of a weapon that you feel like it's partially indiscriminate, right? It will kill civilians. You get in other words, things can get morally gray, but actually, and by the way, this takes us back to that bridge being bombed. Remember the Kerch Bridge? The Kerch Bridge is the bridge that Russia built connecting Russia over here. You can't see it on the map, to Kerch, the city of Kerch, and then Crimea here. The Ukrainians, we believe, but who knows? We really don't know who did it, but it's probably Ukrainians, bombed the bridge last September and caused a lot of damage to it. It was, we believe, a guy driving a truck that had a truck bomb. He, we believe, was either a suicide bomber, or he was either a willful suicide bomber or an unwilling suicide bomber who didn't know. Either way, we all sort of skirted beyond that and didn't really discuss, right? Was that an act of terrorism? I mean, thank you, Tomcat. would it be, for example, would it be an act of terrorism if you used a missile to attack the bridge, right? We'd probably say no, because your strategic bridge used for Russian troops. Is it an act of terrorism when you use a truck bomb? Is it an act of terrorism if he didn't know the driver and we put a bomb in a regular truck driver's truck? Is that an act of terrorism? Is it an act of terrorism if he does know, but he decides to sacrifice his life by blowing himself up in his truck on the bridge? Is that now not terrorism, right? When somebody does that in Israel, we say it's terrorism, right? I mean, I'm even talking to myself here, because if somebody decides to sacrifice their life and blow themselves up in a truck on a bridge in Israel, I call that terrorism. But then was it terrorism if the Ukrainians did it? And if it was terrorism, does that make it wrong that the Ukrainians did it? Or are you now saying, hey, maybe in this case, I'm okay with it, right? It's interesting. I mean, I'm a lawyer trained as well, and this is the way lawyers are taught to sort of analyze things. You kind of have to keep slicing it thinner and thinner and seeing, does your argument stand, or do you have to change your argument, right? It's very interesting. Let me see here. This is Wilson saying, thank you for that, Wilson. Terrorism is all based on perspective. There's arguments for the founders to be called terrorists. Sure, of the opinion that it depends on which side wins. Well, I guess that's what, I mean, there are definitions of terrorism, although I remember a couple of years ago, people looking into this and said that the US government did not have at least from a couple of years ago, did not have a unified definition of terrorism. That we had, the FBI had one definition. I believe the Department of Justice had another. US law, various US laws had different definitions of terrorism. I mean, it was really interesting because it's something that, typically we say violence to compel like political goals, but you know what I mean? Like, is it violence against civilians or government to compel civilian? But right, it's really weird. Right. Were the French terrorists in World War II? Well, I mean, they were actually in some ways, but were they good terrorists? Right. I mean, clearly they were good, whatever word you want to use. I mean, I guess my point is we can quibble about the word and say maybe we don't use that word, but in a way we should use the word, because we do feel that certain things are acts of terror and unacceptable. Right. I mean, in principle, right? We don't like people setting bombs in grocery stores or bombs in restaurants and things, right? I mean, for political purposes, but it's really weird, I don't know. It's a tough, and Colin's saying if you're defending your existence, I don't think it's terrorism, and then you get to the question of, well, actually, the last one I'm going to throw out, by the way, throw out meaning posit to you guys. We won't, I'm not going to talk about this, but for you to think about people. I'm very pro-Israel, but I'm very pro-Palestinian. I think the Palestinians have been screwed from the beginning, and screwed by the Arab states as well, mind you. And they don't get a fair shake from the Israelis, but I'm sympathetic to why the Israelis don't give them a fair shake, because, people, it's a long story. It's a very long story. I'm not going to get into it, but what do you do in a situation like Israel? That as an American, the best thing to sort of compare it to would be the Hatfields and the McCoys, which is an old feud that I grew up knowing about, but young people today might not know about. Somebody my age or older would. Thank you, Jetta Mom. But the idea is, oh, my friend David, I got to call him. Oh, if you're watching, David, I'm going to call you back after the show. I'm going to give him can I call you later? Oh, lovely. Old friend of mine. What do you do in a situation where, yes, the Palestinians are blowing up people in restaurants, but the Israelis are bombing cities to go after, terrorists without caring that they're going to kill a lot of civilians. But the Israelis are doing that because the Palestinians, or their supporters, I shouldn't just say the Palestinians, their supporters did this. And if you go back in time, by the way, if you're as old as me, you remember when they used to blow up airplanes, when they would blow up Israeli airplanes in order to kill people on a regular basis, like left and right killing civilians. So you understand, if you're older, why Israel does this, why Israel is really hard ass, because Jews have been getting killed for a very long time and they've had enough. But if you're a Palestinian, you're not really thrilled about what happens to you, so you react in kind. And this is why I'm saying, in many ways, I'm kind of in the middle on the crisis. But from a terrorism or a moral war perspective, each party can be doing something where you say what they're doing makes sense. Doesn't matter if their land is stolen. It really doesn't. It doesn't matter if the land's stolen. Somebody's saying their land was stolen. I got news for you. History of the world, land gets stolen. That's the whole way it works. Literally Adam and Eve were the only ones that didn't steal land. And then probably everybody after them did. But you could have each party that you can sympathize with. I get why Israel does this because of all the terrorist attacks. I get why the Palestinians do it because they have nothing. And what do? But then you get into a conundrum of, I get why both sides do it, but it ends up being a catch-22 where neither can win and both feed each other. Anyway, we got into a whole discussion on terrorism I didn't intend to get into, but it's very interesting. Not Russia's point, not really. I'm talking more about as far as techniques you use and everything else. The problem is in terms of Russia has not made the argument like the Palestinians. I mean, the Palestinians can make a valid argument for why they're fighting. The Israelis can make a valid argument for why they're fighting. Russia has no valid argument. Russia's fighting because they've got a psychological complex, because it's an egomania mixed with an insecurity, inferiority. So it's inferior egomania. I've talked about this before. Why don't you like me? I'm the best country in the world. I need to invade you and bomb you and kill you to make you like me. That is not what the Palestinians have a legitimate argument for what they're fighting for. And Israel has a legitimate argument for what it's fighting for. Ukrainians have a legitimate argument for what they're fighting for. The Russians came in because Vladimir Putin wants to be Peter the Great, and they wanted more land. That's the only reason the Russians are there. That's the only reason. Russia was being surrounded by NATO. First, that's bull. That's bull. Ukraine's really okay. First, you know what? Don't block them yet. So KDH, Russia was being surrounded by NATO. Let's pretend what you're saying is true, even though Ukraine's been trying to join NATO since 2008. It's been 15 years. So I'm going to guess there really hasn't been a lot of movement towards NATO, moving towards Russia. But let's pretend you're right. That's why Russia had to come in and steal hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian children. That's why Russians had to come in and rape and murder Ukrainian women and children because NATO expanded. That's why Russia, from the beginning of the war, has been targeting civilians as a matter of policy, something no civilized country does, something no civilized country has had to do since, in 70 years plus probably, but to just simply target civilians, because if we kill enough civilians, then maybe they'll go. Russia does that on a regular basis. Russia had to literally kill all of these Ukrainians, civilians on purpose, attacking apartment buildings and churches. And orphan. They hit an orphanage yesterday because NATO expanded. Explain that to me. Now you can ban their ass. But explain that to me. It's such a bunch of bull when people bring up that argument. Again, it's a lie anyway. It's a total lie. It's a lie. Oh, Purnell, they've got 11 time zones. Purnell says they've got 9 time zones. It's enough. Russia has 11 time zones. They've got enough land. No, but it's a bunch of BS too. NATO was expanding. By the way, too, NATO was not expanding. Like I said, Ukraine's been trying to get there for 15 years. You know why NATO expanded, though? Why NATO got bigger in Europe? And why all the former Soviet countries, not all of them, but a lot of them, the part of the Soviet Union, and then the former Soviet satellites, the country that were in their orbit in Europe, joined NATO? Because they were raped by Russia for 45 years. The Russians took them over after World War II because the Russians had a pact with the Nazis. Yes, wonderful little Russia that hates the Nazis loved the Nazis. They had a secret deal with them, and they were going to split up Europe and told the Nazis, you go and have fun in Western Europe. We're going to take Eastern Europe. Don't worry, we're not going to attack you, so you're free to have fun doing the Holocaust and everything you want to do, Mr. Nazi. And that's what Russia did. And then the Nazis ended up turning around 2 years later and attacking Russia. So then Russia was at war anyway because their good friends, the Nazis, stabbed them in the back. What happens when the war ends? Russia takes Eastern Europe and turns it into a criminal colony, turns it into a prison. It was the worst. I've been to Eastern Europe when it was Eastern Europe. Scary as F what they did there. It was Communist dictatorship, what they did in Eastern Europe, what the Russians did. 45 years these people lived. Horrific economic conditions, because some people on the far left like to say, oh, things were good. Horrific economic conditions, horrific medical conditions, and they were Stalinist dictatorships, what these people were living in, okay? So once they finally got liberated, because the Soviet Union finally came crashing down in 1991, the women that were being raped for 45 years came running out of the house and said, protect me. This guy's a lunatic, and we protected them. And the Russia defenders want to go, see, you expanded, right? Right? NATO expanded. Yeah, NATO did expand because all the literally Russia's entire satellite in the East, I don't think there's a single country. No, there isn't a single country that was a Russian satellite. And I'm talking satellite, the Soviet bloc. The Soviet bloc did not include Yugoslavia, so don't go throwing in Yugoslavia and Albania. But the Soviet bloc, every single one of them got out of there and said, please, NATO, take us, save us. That's why NATO expanded. You know, it is a white knight story, and it's a real white knight story. We helped save their asses because they needed protection from the guy that was brutalizing them for 45 years. But it ticks me off, though, because people don't bring that up enough, and they should bring it up. When they bring up the NATO shouldn't expand. When you say NATO shouldn't expand, you're saying Eastern Europeans don't deserve the protection that they're asking for from the guy that screwed them for 45 years. That's what you're saying when you say it shouldn't expand. That we shouldn't help people who are being killed and murdered and terrorized. You know, I disagree. I think it's immoral. I do. I think it's a totally immoral position to say that. But it also is trying to be historically ignorant because literally NATO expanded. I mean, literally. Well, guess why NATO expanded? Because, like I said, the kidnap victim escaped and said, please help me. That's why NATO expanded. No, you don't hear the argument. It drives me crazy. Russia, man. No, but again, part of the problem, though, is I think NATO is being very careful about calling Russia on this stuff because we want to be able to reach some deal with them in the end or whatever. And if we demonize them too much, but I think that's bullshit because Ronald Reagan never had a problem demonizing the Soviet Union. Yet he was happy to sit down with Gorbachev and reach some really big arms control treaties. After demonizing the Soviets, Reagan reached the biggest arms control treaties, you know? So I think Biden's wrong on this one. Biden's doing way. I'm happy to speak about the invasion of Iraq. I opposed it. What's your point? The interesting thing, actually, I'm blocking him because he's a troll, but the interesting thing with the invasion of Iraq is that 2003, the earlier invasion, 1991, totally justified. Iraq was literally same thing. They were trying to wipe out Kuwait, and hugely important in terms of the oil. People who try to say it was a war for oil. Of course it was a war for oil. Are you stupid? We're just going to let Saddam Hussein take over the Middle East? Are you insane? Of course it was a war for oil. And it was a justified war for oil. But the second one was a lie. And I didn't support it at the time because it was a lie. But I'll tell you this, as a matter of policy, America did not have a policy in Iraq of let's kill as many civilians as possible and maybe Saddam Hussein will give up. That was not American policy. It was never American policy. Civilians got killed, and I got news for you. When civilians got killed, or there were other horrific war crimes like Abu Ghraib, right? When the American troops did that horrible thing at the prison with the you know what I mean, the horrible treatment. They took pictures of the prisoners, all this kind of crap, right? Well, what happened when that happened? We found out about it and we got pissed. It was a scandal in this country when we found out that our troops did that. How many scandals have you seen in Russia since the war in Ukraine started? Seen any? Right? We have seen nonstop Russian crimes against humanity, genocide taking place. And have you seen any scandal in Russia about it? See any legislatures standing up and saying, oh, these people need to go to jail, they need to be tried, we need to change the law? None of that. Not a damn thing. That's the difference between Russia and America. It's the difference between Russia and every civilized country in the world. They're not like us. I'm just telling you, they're not like us. And anybody who likes to point about the things that we did wrong, yeah, we're not perfect. But again, it's like It's like the people that talk about like all governments lie. And I'm like, yeah, all people lie too. But some people are serial pathological liars, and some people tell white lies when they need to make things better. Some governments, every government lies, but some governments lie all the time. That's Russia. Totally different. But yeah, I love that. We're gonna compare the U.S. in Iraq to Russia when Russia's policy is to kill civilians. U.S. policy is not to kill civilians. U.S. policy, like all of NATO's policy, is to minimize civilian damages. That's what we do, as a matter of fact. Russia literally maximizes civilian damages on purpose. I'm reading somebody's comments. I was reading Minji's comment. I saw the word perfect. On purpose, Russia kills civilians because they think they're going to break the backbone of the governments by killing civilians. It's, oh God, anyway. Bah! All right. You know what? I'm going to do a quick news summary, and then we'll go spend a little bit of time over at Discord because we're already going late again. I thought it was going to be a quick show. I will do a quick summary here. Yeah, we talked about the Erdogan thing on earlier. We did about Ukraine and CNN, which is good that he's supporting Ukraine. The problem's going to be Hungary. They're the ones that are going to stand up and cause a big problem. All right. Thank you, Martin, for the gift there. Appreciate it. All right, let me do a quick, make sure I didn't miss any questions. Yep. Okay, Anthony Wilson. Okay, good. I didn't miss any questions here. That's good. All right, hang on. I'm just going to pull these off. So in case one pops up, I don't miss it. There we go. Oops. Excellent. All right, guys. All right, let me do a quick summary of the stories we covered, and then we'll go to Discord and hang for a little bit, and then I want to go make some dinner because I'm hungry. Boom. Where's my first page? Oh, yeah. So tomorrow morning, coffee talk. Thank you, Nancy. I almost forgot. Tomorrow morning, coffee talk. So tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. Eastern time, that's New York City time, we are going to be going and hanging out on TikTok and on Discord, and we will be hanging out. It'll only be for paid subscribers. That's paid Discord subscribers, paid YouTube subscribers, paid Twitch. What did I say? Discord. I think I said Discord. Oh, and Ko-fi. And people, but anybody monthly, I should say monthly. I made monthly subscribers. So if you're a paid monthly subscriber on TikTok, YouTube, Ko-fi, Twitch, you'll be able to join us. It'll be closed for everybody else. You can find it on Discord. In the left-hand column, you'll see the little thing that says weekly VIP chat or whatever. It'll be 11 a.m. You guys on TikTok show up as well. Thank you for the gift there, Salty. TikTok, very easy, same thing. It'll be at 11 a.m. Please show up. And like I said, it'll only be for the TikTok, only for the paid subscribers as my thank you to you guys. So thank you for that. All right. Let's, sorry, I was giving an angel his wings here. Hang on. Oops. Where is this? Oh, there it is. Oh, no. Don't do that. Shoot. Okay, mods, I just blocked somebody by accident. Help me out on YouTube. Shoot. Samuela Nalsegusegu just got blocked by accident. If somebody can unblock her, otherwise I'm going to have to go and look after the show. All right, I'll go look after the show. I don't think you can unblock people, or can you? If you can, it was Samuel, like Samuel with an A at the end. Samuela. I was going after a troll, and I blocked a good person by accident. Sorry, Samuela. See if you guys can save her. If not, did he fix it? I didn't know you can undo it. Thank you. Okay, good. Woof. Yeah, there was a troll. See, I'm going to leave the trolls alone. Okay, coffee talk, 11 a.m. Zelenskyy arrived in Turkey and Slovakia today after visiting Bulgaria and Czech Republic. Biden is providing cluster munitions to Ukraine. Russia complained, but of course, Russia's been using them for a year and a half. Ukrainian forces made further gains south of Bakhmut. It looks like Ukraine may be trying to get Bakhmut in order to embarrass the Russians, but also cause more friction between Putin and Prigozhin and the Ministry of Defense. International Atomic Energy Agency monitors are still trying to get on top of one of the reactors, Reactor 4, at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. Russia's refusing to let them up there. This is one of the plants that Ukraine has said Russia's preparing to blow up. So it's certainly suspicious that and Ukraine said they're doing stuff on the roof, that Russia's refusing to, let them on the roof. Big NATO summit next week. Stoltenberg, who's the Secretary General of NATO, said that the summit will agree on a 3-part package to bring Ukraine closer to NATO, which I think sounds like total BS. And Erdogan in Turkey came out again opposed to Sweden joining NATO today. CNN reports that Western officials are not seeing signs yet of nuclear weapons being moved to Belarus or of the Wagner Group being moved to Belarus. And Prigozhin himself appears to still be in St. Petersburg, Russia, where he's been based and where he's from. So kind of weird. And then the Czech Republic sent Ukraine more attack helicopters and ammunition today, which was very nice of them. So, woo-woo. I don't know what the timetable is on Tuesday. You can Google it and see, but it's the NATO summit in Lithuania. You'll see it on Google. Hi, 83-year-old mom of D. Oh, mom. Oh, mom. Is she awake? It's like 2 a.m. there or something, or 1 a.m. You got your poor 83-year-old mother up at past midnight? Unless you're here in the States, that's crazy. My mom goes to bed at 10. Well, by 11, maybe. She's 93. But you're funny. Anyway, hi, mom. Anyway, guys, so yeah, let's go over. We will go over to TikTok. We'll go over to Discord, hang a little bit. It's discord.aravosis.com. And if you go over, make sure you check out the auctions. Like I said, we got 9 different auction items. I think a lot of cool stuff. Otherwise, tomorrow morning, 11 a.m., coffee talk with my paid TikTok subscribers. You can subscribe right now if you like. And the paid subscribers on Discord, YouTube, Twitch, and Ko-fi. Thank you, Bashir. And you can find the Ko-fi link at the bottom of the screen. And you can also find the Ko-fi link for you guys on TikTok over at aravosis.com or the link in my profile. Click it. And the very top link that comes up on the page will be Ko-fi. All right, guys. Thank you very much. Oh, hey, Marie. I do. Thank God. Yeah. Thank you, Marie. All right, guys. You have a good weekend too. Thanks, Purnell. And let's, like I said, we'll go hang at Discord for a little bit. Okay. Oh, you're in the UK and lived in Kyiv for 28 years. Wow. Well, happy to help if I can, Wow. Boy, that's a real long. Wow. You're like Ukrainian if you're there for 28 years. My God. Wow. That's amazing. All right, guys. Have a good night.